Hello and welcome back to the European show. This is episode 7 now, and we will be looking back at this week's Champions League games as well as looking ahead to this weekend's fixtures as well. And to join me in doing so, as always, is Nick. So welcome back, Nick.
Thank you very much, Jack. How are you doing?
I am doing well. So the first place we will start, obviously, as we normally do, is we'll go chronologically in the Champions League. We'll start with the relatively big game of that evening. And so the first place we'll start is arguably the biggest game in the whole of the group stages, is Barcelona versus Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich versus Barcelona. And obviously this is a brand new Barcelona under Xavi. They started off very, very well in La Liga, and obviously Bayern Munich have been struggling as of late in the Bundesliga, and surprisingly Barcelona actually played pretty well in the first half.
Yep, absolutely. Barcelona played a high press, which really helped stuff out Nagelsmann's preferred playing out from the back, and with very advanced lines. Xavi ball essentially managed to control Bayern Munich. However, then it seems like you could very clearly see that Nagelsmann completely reformatted how the team was playing at halftime. They came out from the changing rooms, just restructured. Barcelona didn't really know how to cope with it, and they got torn down the wings mostly by Sané on the right. But for the first 45 minutes, we saw just how effective we saw how effective Xavi's tactics could be, especially in ball recovery. In possession, they couldn't get the ball to the strikers or attackers even as much as they would have liked to. In part compliment to Nagelsmann, but at the same time they would play well, move the ball around. They definitely look like a completely different team to what they were 8 months ago. They're playing considerably better. They are actually capable of maintaining possession and moving the ball up the pitch, evading counter press, things such as this. So it's looking very positive for Barcelona now, even though they did lose.
Obviously for Bayern Munich there was a lot of talking points before the game began when Nagelsmann started Upamecano instead of De Ligt. The argument about it could have been the fact that Upamecano knows how Robert Lewandowski plays. Clearly, the gamble paid off, as Lewandowski had very little impact on the game and in front of goal. The goals for Bayern Munich was first scored by Lucas Hernandez and the second by Leroy Sané. Obviously, Leroy Sané is coming into his own as of late. He obviously impressed against Inter last week. He's done it again against Barcelona. He's probably, along with Jamal Musiala and Kimmich, been one of the only consistent players for Bayern Munich in this start of the season.
In defense to Mane, I think he did fine in this game. Well, he wasn't incredibly dangerous. He was mostly working towards spreading out the Barcelona defense and more creating danger with his positional play instead of his on-the-ball play. But whenever he did receive the ball, he wasn't as good as we've seen him. But I think this is just kind of like an adaptation phase. He'll really get. He showed what he's capable of in the first few games. So we'll really see what can happen.
And then obviously we saw Jamal Musiala stand out once again, and this is definitely his breakthrough season, which, to be in this type of form that he's in, especially going as we approach the World Cup, it's not only beneficial for him, it's beneficial for Germany as well, and he's definitely solidified himself as top 5 best teenagers in the world. Arguably top 3.
Jamal Musiala is actually extremely good. Obviously, we do have a much better teenager to talk about later. But having said that, Jamal Musiala is special, and I think that England will miss out on not having secured him for their own national team. Even though obviously he did always look like he was going to join Germany, he was still in the younger divisions of the English national team.
The other game in that group did see Inter Milan beat Victoria Pilsen 2-0. Dzeko and Denzel Dumfries both scored. Then Group A, one of the more wide open groups, Liverpool versus Ajax. This is obviously one of the crucial games to determine the top threes, and this group is now wide open again as Liverpool beat Ajax 2-1. But it wasn't that easy because although Liverpool took the lead, Ajax were able to grab hold of the game and put Liverpool under considerable amounts of pressure before John Matip scored in the 89th minute to secure a win for Liverpool, which they definitely needed.
We saw Liverpool playing better than they have been in their previous league games and against Napoli, where they've been famously bad. But honestly, they did dominate the game mostly. But Ajax also played a really good game in counter to that. Especially Kudus, he put on an absolute show as he's been doing for the past few weeks. He has been basically unplayable. And once again, he showed off how good he is, scoring a literally outrageous goal. He had no angle on the turn, powers the shot in top bins. Absolutely insane goal. But however, the goal was created as many Liverpool conceded goals have been created down the right-hand side, showing that Trent isn't a particularly... Go ahead, Jack. Defend your right back.
For that goal, yes, but then for the rest of the game, he was defensively sound. So I don't think you can really say he's a shit defender because it was one mistake, and everyone obviously makes a mistake. And then you can't really... You've seen the shot. You can't really do a lot to stop that. In terms of the
shot, even though Van Dijk was there, and you can say whatever you want, obviously that was an amazing shot. No one saw it coming as well because he wasn't facing the goal when he took it. But the build-up still happened down the right. But moving on from that, we've seen an interesting shift in philosophy of Ajax every time they played in the Champions League. In Eredivisie, every single time, every single game, they're playing this possession football where they assert themselves over their opponents. They know they're better than the team they're playing against. They know they have high quality players, and they feel comfortable playing their normal fluid football. But in the Champions League, especially against bigger teams, they clearly lose this confidence in themselves because they're playing better teams, but because of that, they kind of shrink and go from a possession style team to just a sit back and counter attack team, which is what we saw especially in the second half. Ajax essentially just sat in their own half, gave Liverpool the ball, and tried to create danger through counterattacks, which isn't how the team is really suited. It's not something they're particularly capable of doing. They did manage to create danger on a few occasions, especially because they had the advantage that Liverpool is particularly vulnerable to counterattacks. But the fact of the matter is they didn't score from any of these, and they invited pressure constantly from Liverpool, which begs the question, is it really that worth giving up your philosophy against a team just because you don't think you can beat them? I think if Ajax had really stood up for themselves, and in general, I think in most European games, if they are braver and try and play the way they usually play, they can start getting better results than they've been getting recently.
And then the other game in that group was played a day later, and that was Rangers versus Napoli, which Napoli convincingly won 3-0, and that sets them quite comfortably at top of the group, which does also make the next two games interesting as they play Ajax. And with Liverpool playing the easier team in that group in Rangers, it is going to leave the final two games very interesting to see who can potentially win or qualify out of this group, because it is wide open. Then a group which contained quite a lot of shocks. Obviously, I think we'll start with the bigger one. It's Porto lost 4-0 to Club Brugge, which is very interesting because obviously this was Porto are normally a team who will qualify out of the group, make it in around the 16 of quarterfinals, and here they were fully torn apart by a team that is considerably weaker than them. So yeah, it's just that result is shaking up this group quite a bit, and it does leave Porto in trouble because they have lost the first two games now. But then the other game in the group saw Bayer Leverkusen beat Atletico Madrid 2-0 with two relatively late goals as well, and assists from Jeremy Frimpong, which, as I said, it's blown the group wide open now.
Yeah, it certainly does. It was an embarrassing game for Atletico. There's no other way to put it. Against the 17th team in the Bundesliga that doesn't really know how to play football at the moment, to lose is really quite special. Atletico just didn't play particularly well. The midfield was dysfunctional, and honestly, like players like Saul and stuff like that, they're not good enough to be playing this level of game. It's true. I love him, but he's just not at that level right now. Then we also have, for example, Mario Hermoso. He's good and he can really put in work, and he's very good at playing the ball as a defender. But in terms of actually defending, he's not very good, and that was shown more than ever in the second goal. But also throughout the whole game, he looked weak. And playing him and Reinildo at the same time was an interesting decision by Simeone, which didn't work particularly well. So throughout the game, Atleti weren't able to create lots of danger. There was one opportunity in which should have 100% been a penalty, like 100%. A Leverkusen centre back sticks his hand out, covers the shot, clearly touches and deflects the ball, and it's nowhere near natural position as well. He moves his body into the ball. However, VAR decided to have the day off and did not call it. But honestly, Atletico played so bad, they didn't really deserve a goal anyways. But yeah, then two counter-attack goals came along. Well, and then it also didn't help that Oblak was resting after a knock a few weeks ago. So Ivo Gribic was in goal, who is fine, but his mispositioning allowed the first goal to happen. And as I said earlier, Mario Hermoso allowed the second goal to happen. And so it was just kind of Leverkusen were able to take advantage of Atletico's weak points at the important and strategic points during the game.
Normally, Leverkusen should use this as like a platform now, as they can finally use this to help them start in playing well in the Bundesliga season, as beating a relatively competent team in Atletico Madrid. You should use that now. But this is Leverkusen, and to make matters worse, especially for you, they'll probably end up losing at the weekend. Finally, there was some other shocks in this group. We saw, or on this day, we saw Sporting beat Tottenham 2-0, which obviously we mentioned this when we previewed the groups. Antonio Conte doesn't like the Champions League, and clearly once again they struggled. Yes, they beat Marseille last weekend, but some would say Marseille should be a better team than Sporting. But then they've conceded two late goals to blow this group wide open as well. It doesn't look good, especially if you want to challenge for any sort of silverware, regardless of the competition.
Yeah, I mean, we know Conte isn't particularly good in Europe, and he's also managing Spurs, one of the teams that struggles the most in not only winning competitions but on the European stage. Other than that one, you could say even fluky final they got to, they haven't really shown to be capable of anything big in Europe, even in whether it's Conference League, Europa League, or Champions League. They never seem to really impress at all. So I think the combination of these two isn't going to lead to very much in the near future.
And then the other game in that group saw Frankfurt beat Marseille 1-0. It was Jesper Lindström opened scoring for Frankfurt. This is their first win in the Champions League. but obviously there was a lot of crowd trouble surrounding the game, especially, of course, this normally happens with Marseille, but there was stuff to do with the far right or Nazis for Frankfurt, which is big for them because Frankfurt are one of the most outspoken when it comes to anti-far right, and you can see it throughout their most recent history, as well as the fact that one of their best defenders, Marvin Hinteregger, had connections to the far right, and Hinteregger suddenly retires in the summer that's just gone. So obviously Frankfurt said, oh, of course they'll look into it. But yeah, so now we'll have our break and then we'll be back with the Wednesday games. Okay, welcome back from our break. We'll now look at the Wednesday games. So the first game we'll look at, the biggest one, is Manchester City versus Borussia Dortmund. Obviously, this is a rematch from a few years ago where Manchester City beat Dortmund through two legs, through quite precarious refereeing. And Dortmund definitely put up a fight against Manchester City, as the first half was very boring, to be fair, and they went in at 0-0 before the second half, kind of the game kicked into life. Dortmund opened the scoring through who else but Jude Bellingham.
This is the generational young talent, the teenager I was referencing earlier. I mean, there's no point in us talking too much about him because every time he does it well, we go on at length, but we love Jude Bellingham because he's quite good.
Yeah, our opinions of Jude Bellingham are quite clear. And the Dortmund were able to hold on to the game for quite a while. However, then Edin Terzic made some questionable substitutions, and the main one's bringing on Nico Schlotterbeck. I'm not disregarding Nico Schlotterbeck as a defender, let me make that clear. It's the fact that they would then have three centre-backs on the pitch, which clearly ruined the tempo and the fluidity that Dortmund were having, and then it kind of broke down from there. First of all, John Stones opened scoring with a very good goal. However, I would like to point out the goalkeeping from Alexander Meyer could have been a lot better. It's worth noting that Meyer was playing for Jans Regensburg last season in the second division, and they finished mid-table in the second division. So if this was Gregor Kobel, would have been a bit different story. And then Erling Haaland scores again, this time against his former team, after a very good cross from João Cancelo and a very good finish from Haaland. But once again, it makes you beg the question about Meyer. Could he have done better? Could he made a better save?
In this case, it was a lot more difficult. Mostly because it's so close in, and it was well aimed. It wasn't like super difficult for him to catch, but I think the main thing is it was from close in. He didn't have time to react. And who in the right mind would imagine Haaland leaping and catching a ball with his feet that's like 2.5 meters in the air? It's so unreasonable. It is so unreasonable. Like, I guarantee you, no goalkeeper would be prepared for that absolute beast to like whack it. Of course, he should have definitely saved the first goal by John Stones. It was powerful, sure, but you can see like his decision making in slow motion. You see how he begins moving his hands, stutters, thinks about it, and when he thinks about it even more, it's already too late. That's just not where you need to be. You need to like put your hand out of reflex. It's right next to him. But in Haaland's goal, it's much more forgivable. It's just Haaland being good.
So, the two takeaways from this game, I think it's the fact that Dortmund are able to clearly go toe-to-toe with the very best. And we saw that in this game. For 80 minutes they were winning and also holding Manchester City at bay. And there was some questionable match what's the word? Some questionable game management from Edin Terzic kind of ruined what Dortmund had. And I think the other one is Manchester City. We've seen that they've been exposed again in some way. Although they won the game, they were being exposed for 80 minutes. And it was clearly their weaknesses were shown. And against a team that is a bit more competent than them, can be exposed. So I definitely think the return leg in November or whatever will be very interesting. And I definitely think at the Signal Iduna Park, Dortmund could potentially win now after what we've seen. And then the other game in that group saw Sevilla draw 0-0 with Copenhagen. So it just gets worse for Sevilla again.
Yeah, Sevilla are just tragic. It actually looks like they don't know how to play football. How can you not score against Copenhagen? Like, they're actually so bad. Their attackers aren't getting the ball, and the few times they do, they kind of like look, stare at it, and then completely fumble it. Their midfield doesn't know how to progress in terms of like the football. They just can't get it up the pitch. They're like a slow, boring, lazy, and uncreative. Can't keep possession for the life of them. Their defense is full of holes. It did hold up in this one game, to be fair, but like you would really, really hope that it does. But yeah, they're just disappointing, and their fate is in God's hands now, honestly. What will happen to them, nobody really knows.
Then the other big game in this group was Real Madrid versus Leipzig. This was another case which we saw last year, where the substitutions really made a difference for Real Madrid, as Leipzig kind of run top of Real Madrid for quite a bit of this game, and they had their chances to score, but Courtois and the Real Madrid defence were able to clearly keep out the likes of Nkunku and Werner. And then, obviously, quite questionably, Ancelotti decided to sub on Marco Asensio. Obviously, Valverde scores
as per
again,
usual, yeah.
And he's made a habit of scoring this season. A very good goal before Marco Asensio, clearly a bit of an outcast at Real Madrid, doubles Real Madrid's lead. So is this... Obviously, Benzema's injured, as we said. Obviously, Eden Hazard didn't play. Can Asensio fight his way into this team and give himself a bit of a starting place, or is this a bit too much?
I think he's well and truly out of it. He's outclassed so badly by Valverde, and he just hasn't been himself. No, that's not true. He hasn't recovered the flash of quality that we saw in his early 20s. And honestly, at this point, I think he just needs a breath of fresh air, at least a loan move, something like that. But as things are, he can't compete, and he's just not good enough. So I think he's well and truly out of it.
And then in the other game in that group, saw Shakhtar Donetsk beat Celtic, or the Drews 1-1 with Celtic. And one player who's clearly caught the eye of everyone is Mikhailo Mudryk. He, in the 2 games they've played, he has 2 goals and 2 assists. And so he's clearly making a name for himself, especially after this past summer. It's rumoured he was going to leave Shakhtar, but he obviously stayed. He stayed with them, especially after their mass exodus of players, and he's clearly showing everyone what he can do. Juventus. They after last week they lost to PSG. They've now lost to Benfica. They obviously took the lead against Benfica through Milik, but then João Mario and David Neres both scored. It does kind of make you think now. Obviously, we've questioned the transfer strategy of Juventus, but now it's questioning the playing style. Obviously, last season, Max Allegri did quite poorly, and he's still doing quite poorly again. So clearly, kind of showing his tactics that worked 6 years ago or whatever are quite dinosaurish, and they kind of need a new manager to come in and save this team.
I think, yeah. I mean, in a sense, yes, they do need a new manager, but like you said, their players are also part of the problem. They need to completely wipe their squad and start from scratch. Unfortunately, they're owned by Agnelli, who doesn't have the footballing sense to do that. He won't know what he has to do, which is just start from zero. Because when they had more tactical system-oriented managers with more modern tactics, Agnelli didn't invest in the squad. Or more like he didn't bring players that were well suited for these managers or their systems. He brought in players like fucking Rabiot or like De Ligt, who is good but didn't fit with Conte's idea of football, shall we say. And now so there's a mismatched squad and a bad manager, and they have to get rid of everything. They have to start again with literally a project. Get a manager, think how he plays, and then build a team around what the manager needs. But that's not looking like it's going to happen anytime soon. So it's a good time to not be a Juventus fan right now, Jack.
They obviously need to do what AC Milan have done. AC Milan obviously went through that dark period. They had to reset completely, and it's clearly worked. They've invested in youth. They have a good manager, and now they're obviously reaping the benefits of that. So Juventus clearly need to do something similar. The other game in this group, so PSG beat Maccabi Haifa. This should have been a given, but PSG did actually go a goal down. So you know me and Nix were preying on that downfall of PSG. However, it didn't happen. Messi equalised. Mbappe and Neymar also scored. But once again, the defence is an issue. It doesn't matter how good your attack is. If your defence is terrible, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think this is just another showing of why PSG are going to struggle in the latter stages of the Champions League when they actually play a good team.
I mean, yes, absolutely. They did win and they attacked well, but like as you said, they didn't have the structure, and their defense simply isn't coherent enough to consider them favourites for now, in my opinion at least.
And then in the other group, or in the final group, Milan beat Dinamo Zagreb 3-1, and Chelsea drew 1-1 with RB Salzburg. Obviously, it's not really looking that good for Chelsea, because obviously they lost the first game and drew the second one, while Salzburg are once again causing a bit of a stir in the group, which they like chaos, clearly. And especially with them playing Dinamo Zagreb in the next two match days, is looking quite promising for them. So now we'll look ahead to this weekend's fixtures. In the Bundesliga, we have two important games. One is the revered derby. It's Borussia Dortmund versus Schalke. It's arguably the biggest derby in the country. Obviously, Schalke have started off the season quite poorly, as Dortmund have obviously struggled as of late. Last weekend they did lose 3-0 to Leipzig, which is obviously funny because Marco Rose is the manager of Leipzig now. And it was the classic Dortmund were kind of, they did well for the opening few minutes, but then Leipzig kind of got a hold of them, and Szoboszlai and pulled them apart with a very good goal as well, to be fair. So this game but it's a derby, so anything can happen. There's no way to predict this, because obviously in the past this derby has shown to be chaotic, and I'm pretty sure after a season of not meeting each other and both teams being relatively inconsistent, the same thing could happen again. And here's the thing, before I get on to the next game, this game kicks off at 3:30. It's the classic normal Bundesliga kickoff time. And then obviously in the later on game, it's Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Leipzig. Whoever in their right mind decided, you know what, because you should no matter what, the biggest games of like the weekend in every single league should be isolated, because obviously that would attract the most interest, because obviously people's attention won't be skewed or whatever. So if it was me, I would have stuck Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Leipzig on the Friday. I know it's not possible with Leipzig playing on the Wednesday in the Champions League, but you would stick that game on the Friday, and then you would have Borussia Dortmund versus Schalke in the Topspiel spot on the Saturday. So that means both the biggest games get the most attention. Similarly, last weekend, it's a bit of a rant now, RB Leipzig played Borussia Dortmund. Obviously, the Premier League was cancelled, so this was a bit of like, okay, now we can like showcase themselves to the league. And they didn't do that because obviously Leipzig versus Dortmund kicked off at 3:30 again, while the later on game was Schalke versus Bochum. And I know you could argue, oh, that's a derby. Yes, but I think regardless, Leipzig are a good team. I wasn't going to use the word big because it's quite controversial.
They're not a big team,
but they're a good team.
Yeah.
And Dortmund are a good team as well, and a big team. So you would want that game to garner the most attention. But no. So what I'm getting at from this mini rant was, I think if you want to promote a league better, this deciding of TV slots should be chosen a lot better. You know, I'm aware every game's televised in Germany, but to gain the most attention towards a game, it has to be isolated, so people will only watch that game. But yeah, and it now means, for example, on Friday night when we're recording this, I will have to watch Mainz versus Hertha Berlin, which is a terrible game. Anyway, Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Leipzig is also on Saturday. This is obviously last week, or 2 weeks ago, it's just another normal game. Now it's turning into one of the most fueled games, especially off the pitch, because of what's happened. Obviously, Marco Rose has now joined Leipzig. Obviously, they beat Dortmund and gave Real Madrid a bit of a game. And Daniel Farks came in and has revitalised Borussia Mönchengladbach. And then it's off the pitch with Max Abel. Obviously, I've said this quite a lot now, but Max Abel is now likely join RB Leipzig. And where this gets heated is the fact that in the past, Max Abel has been so anti-Leipzig. He said this is not how you should do a football team, with the corporate stuff. And to go back on yourself and to join this corporate flagship that you've been so against in the past few years, and away from like a proper team with proper roots in Borussia Mönchengladbach, makes you a massive hypocrite. And that's clearly something that's left a sour taste in the Borussia Mönchengladbach fans' mouths, as they've penned an open letter to Max Abel. And what makes it worse is the fact that Max Abel will be given duties which previous sporting directors at Leipzig have not been given before. So it just kind of makes things worse. And Bayern Munich play Augsburg in a bit of a derby. It's the Bavarian derby, but it's not really that big. And then Union Berlin, who are top of the league, play Wolfsburg. And Hoffenheim play Freiburg. Hoffenheim have actually started the season quite well under their new coach. And they've kind of surprised a lot of people, especially because of how poorly they finished last season. So yeah, now we'll have our goals on break and we'll be back with the rest of the leagues. Welcome back from our goals on break. You've just heard the Kaiserslautern goal song So Nick, what do you rate it out of?
It's
10?
fine. I don't really care for it. My opinion of it may be a bit lower because I've just kept on listening to German songs in the goal song breaks. Recently, there's been many in a row, but as it is, I don't think it's super special either. I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
In defence, we're kind of scraping the barrel now for originality when it comes to goal songs, because they're all using the same generic pop songs.
In fairness, we've gone through like at least 70, bordering on 100 goal songs by now.
And so the only place that we can go when it comes to originality is Germany, where we're hearing actually something slightly different. But yeah, I'll give it a 7.
That's quite high. I wouldn't, even under normal circumstances, I don't think I'd give it more than a 5.
So now we'll look at La Liga, where obviously the biggest game is the Madrid derby.
Yep, it is the biggest game in all of Spain. I would like to say myself because I say so. But yeah, it's an excellent derby. It is being played in the Metropolitano, at home for Atletico, and we're seeing a pretty unimaginative Atleti play against a very inspired Real Madrid. It looks difficult for Atletico to pull away with more than a draw. They can maybe hunker down and defend with the crowd behind them, but Atletico has just been completely uninspired and ineffective in attack in recent games. They sometimes manage to create with Mateus Cunha and João Felix and whatnot, but realistically, Real Madrid has been very ordered and compact, and also Vinicius Valverde and Benzema's injured, but Hazard has been fine. But Real Madrid's attack is quite capable of exploiting slow centre backs such as those that Athletic currently are using, particularly Felipe and Axel Witsel. Even though I do love Axel Witsel and he's playing very well, I think it's gonna be a dangerous game for him. But yeah, we'll see a superior Real Madrid going into this game, which should be interesting. But in football you never know, and with Atleti even less. Sometimes they can put out some really special results out of completely nowhere. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Then we also see Villarreal play Sevilla. Obviously, normally this would be a relatively interesting game, but obviously Sevilla have been quite poor as of late, as we've mentioned earlier.
I generally don't think they're going to pick up points, even though it's just not very good. Just Sevilla are so bad, and their team will be tired from Champions League as well. They just generally won't be capable of pulling away with the results.
Then obviously Barcelona play Elche. They should win this, and they probably will, because obviously this is not Barcelona are not as much of a banter club as they used to be. As
they're definitely in their streak right now. Whether they keep it up for a long time, it remains to be seen, but they're certainly not doing bad.
Serie A, we see the biggest game is between Milan versus Napoli. Obviously Napoli are first, Milan are third. I think this is definitely going to kind of set the intentions of mainly Napoli. If Napoli beat Milan, then I'm not going to say it, but Napoli would definitely be challenging at the
Stop saying that when it's too early. Stop. They're definitely beginning very well, and I would love to see them in a competitive spot from now until the next 7 months. But we can't say that yet, and you should have learned your lesson by now, Jack.
So this is definitely be an interesting game, as Napoli have not really had a challenge in the league. Obviously, we've seen how they took apart Liverpool, but Liverpool being quite poor as of late. So this would definitely be an interesting game. Roma play Atalanta. Obviously, Jose Mourinho's Roma have, although are at the top, they have been quite inconsistent. And Atalanta are second. Then we have Udinese play Inter Milan. Udinese are surprising everyone currently, and they're fourth, although we are 6 games.
It's probably because they got rid of Nahuel Molina.
And they were able to thrash Roma as well. So it'd be interesting if they can give the same treatment to Inter Milan as they gave Roma. And Juventus play Monza. Allegedly, even if Juventus lose to Monza, Allegri will not be sacked. which I think just kind of shows the state the club's in. But obviously we've mentioned Juventus already and how much of a joke they are, so we're not going to go into that anymore. Then finally in Ligue, we have PSG playing Lyon. Obviously we've shown how poor PSG can be when they play relatively competent teams, so it'd be interesting if the same thing can happen again. So that was it for today. Thank you for listening. Please like us, follow us, subscribe, and whatever. Yeah, we'll be back after the weekend.
Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week.